Urban Meyer's roster history underscores the absurdity. Meyer coached Aaron Hernandez, whose off-field crimes are well documented, along with other players entangled in assaults, academic misconduct, and more. Yet Feinbaum singled out Newton, a national champion, Heisman Trophy winner, and NFL MVP, as the worst. This selective condemnation is not new. When Deion Sanders recently suggested implementing an NIL salary cap to restore competitive balance, Feinbaum dismissed the proposal and called Sanders a hypocrite rather than engage with the substance. The pattern repeats. Feinbaum routinely targets Cam Newton, Deion Sanders, Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson, outspoken black athletes and coaches, while extending grace to figures such as Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, or Tim Tebow under similar circumstances. Newton is no longer content to remain silent while others distort his story. In response, he laid out an accurate chronology, highlighting facts the commentary networks rarely repeat. One long-standing myth is that Newton was expelled from the University of Florida. He was not. Tim Tebow held the starting job unchallenged, and Meyer had no intention of displacing his star. Like thousands of athletes each year, Newton transferred to find a place where he could play. The move was strategic, not disciplinary. He is, with 3-2-2-5-3-17 to transfer to and more back, Meyer was.
Critics habitually resurrect the 2008 laptop incident to tarnish Newton's entire career. Newton has acknowledged the mistake, but its relevance is overstated. The incident did not prompt his transfer, nor did it derail his trajectory. After leaving Florida, Newton enrolled at Blinn College, a Texas JUCO powerhouse, and led the Buccaneers to a national championship while posting dominant statistics. That performance earned him the opportunity to transfer to Auburn. At Auburn, Newton produced one of the most extraordinary single seasons in collegiate history. More than 4,000 yards of total offense, 50 combined touchdowns, an SEC title, a national championship, and the Heisman Trophy. Achievement compressed into a single year under intense scrutiny. Even that landmark season is recast by Feinbaum as a cautionary tale. He claims Newton ignored head coach Gene Chizik by diving for a goal line touchdown when told to kneel, jeopardizing the game. In reality, Newton explained that the decision was a collective adjustment made in the huddle after reading the defense, while Auburn still held timeouts. The Tigers maintained control and secured the championship. Portraying that moment as reckless serves to recast Newton's success as selfishness rather than leadership. Feinbaum's approach to Sanders reflects the same dynamic. When Sanders urged a structured NIL ceiling to protect athletes and stabilize rosters, Feinbaum immediately labeled him hypocritical. Yet when Saban or Swinney voice identical concerns, Feinbaum frames them as thoughtful guardians of the sport. The inconsistency reveals that the determining factor is not the argument but the identity of the speaker. Unapologetic black leaders who control their narratives, challenge entrenched hierarchies, and Feinbaum's commentary often functions as a check on that influence. Newton countered Feinbaum's latest attack with a concise statement. "You're lying, Paul. Please stop." Behind those words lay a broader indictment of the media machinery that weaponizes half-truths. By calling Newton the worst player Meyer coached, Feinbaum was seeding doubt among fans, front office evaluators, and future historians. Newton, now an established media presence and entrepreneur, no longer depends on traditional outlets to correct the record. He reminded audiences of three essential truths. He departed Florida on his own terms, he led Auburn with support from coaches and teammates, and he captured every major accolade available in college and professional football without conforming to prescribed expectations. An unspoken rule lingers in American sports discourse. Black athletes may excel, but must do so quietly, gratefully, and without highlighting systemic inequities. Newton broke that expectation early by celebrating with unreserved joy, answering questions candidly, and refusing to minimize his personality. For some commentators, that confidence is reinterpreted as arrogance. Feinbaum's repeated attempts to undermine Newton follow a familiar script of policing behavior rather than analyzing performance. Yet, legacy rests not in a pundit soundbite, but in tangible achievements and public memory. Newton's resume, Heisman winner, national champion, NFL MVP, speaks for itself. Millions of fans witnessed his impact on Saturdays and Sundays. Countless young quarterbacks saw someone who looks like them redefine the position's possibilities. The same is true for Sanders, whose player-first coaching philosophy and media savvy continue to influence college football's direction. Feinbaum's commentary cannot erase these realities. Newton, Sanders, Winston, Jackson, and others have already secured their places in football history. By publicly confronting misinformation, Newton set a precedent for athletes who now possess the platforms and technology to present their stories unfiltered. The microphone no longer belongs exclusively to legacy broadcasters. Newton holds it now, and he intends to keep it.
a decisive shift that reduces the gatekeeper's influence and ensures that accomplishments are judged on merit rather than narrative manipulation.
Shedeur is lighting it up in practice every day. You're not even a half bit curious to see what he could do with the ones. That makes no sense. And then on top of all of that, you got players going on podcasts and talking to people in the media saying this guy is really good. Like, this guy is legit. So even your peers respect you enough. How is it that the coaches can't see that? It always starts with the players, where the players like, hey, you see that? You seen that pass he threw?
The Cleveland Browns were taken by surprise when quarterback Shedeur Sanders stepped in for first-team snaps, asserting control of the drill and instantly highlighting deficiencies across the rest of the room. His confident command forced coaches to pause practice clips, reevaluate progressions, and consider immediate adjustments to the depth chart. Within minutes, discussions spread throughout the facility and online forums as fans weighed what Sanders' showing means for the current starters. The organization now faces an urgent, data-driven decision on whether Sanders should move up permanently. Shedeur Sanders arrived at Browns practice, took several first-team reps, and the entire quarterback group immediately felt the pressure. Coaches erased the whiteboard and reviewed their plans. Staff members exchanged concerned comments, and observers began asking whether Sanders was positioned to assume a larger role.
Tony, every year we see at least 1 to 2 teams. They were in last place in their division the year before. No one thought they'd be good, and then they were good. It almost seems like no one's even assuming the Browns can be that, but we see it happen every year. And I get the quarterback stuff, but like, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony. The Browns are trying to run the football, play good defense, not turn the ball over in the passing game, and try and take advantage when they can, correct? That's what they're trying to do.
That was the 2020 offense.
The Cleveland Browns are still searching for stability at quarterback. Deshaun Watson is yet to deliver consistent starter-level production that justifies his contract, and each game renews doubts about whether he can regain peak form. Behind him, rookie Deion Robinson shows promise but remains inexperienced and unpolished. Coaches are evaluating alternatives each week and may need to adjust the depth chart if progress stalls. The roster around them is built to contend now, so ongoing uncertainty under center is increasingly costly.
As we talk about, we do believe in best player available. We do believe in positional value, and we didn't necessarily expect him to be available in the in the 5th round, and so we love adding competition to every position room and adding him to compete with the guys that are already in there. We felt like that was the appropriate thing to do.
The Browns quarterback group is unsettled. Deshaun Watson has yet to provide the reliable, high-level play his contract demands, while rookie Deion Robinson remains promising but unpolished. Depth behind them consists mostly of veterans whose experience lies more in holding clipboards than leading offenses. The coaching staff needs an immediate answer, not a 3-year development project. Shedeur Sanders enters as that potential solution. At Colorado, he passed for more than 3,200 yards despite working behind one of college football's poorest offensive lines, consistently demonstrating poise, quick processing, and accurate ball placement under heavy pressure. Film shows steady reads and disciplined footwork, traits that offset concerns that his profile is built on family name or media attention. Cleveland viewed the signing as a low-risk, high-reward move. Early in camp, Sanders received a handful of first-team snaps intended merely as an evaluation. Those plays quickly changed practice tempo. The ball came out on time, receivers hit their landmarks, and the defense struggled to adjust. Coaches immediately expanded the review using phrases such as evaluate every option, an indication that the depth chart was no longer fixed. Watson sensed the scrutiny. Robinson increased his urgency. Within minutes, competition in the quarterback room intensified. Sanders repeated that performance in subsequent sessions. His footwork remained clean, progression sharp, and throws firm and precise. Each strong rep forced staff to reassess the plan to keep him buried on the developmental track. The broader context magnifies the pressure. Cleveland's roster is built to contend now. Fans are weary of quarterback turnover, and the front office cannot afford another costly misstep under center. Around the league, rookie passers rarely wait multiple seasons anymore. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, and even late pick Brock Purdy established that precedent. If Watson opens the regular season and struggles, public calls for Sanders will grow, especially if the rookie flashes in preseason. Alternatively, another team could attempt to acquire him if Cleveland hesitates to elevate his role. Each scenario underscores the same reality. Sanders' emergence has turned a routine camp evaluation into a critical decision point for the franchise.
And we saw Dillon Gabriel go 11-on-11 with the first team, Shedeur Sanders go 11-on-11 with the second unit. So that was really the big wrinkle today.
Yes, and of course, it was the first time that we have seen Shedeur Sanders get any of those coveted 11-on-11 reps. Of course, again, it wasn't with the first team offense or against the first team defense, but it's progress. And that means that he's going in the right direction, that the arrow is pointing up. He's coming up the learning curve. So that's good for him. And I actually thought just overall, he had a better day than Dylan had today. He completed more passes. He was more on point. In fact, in that 11-on-11 period, he threw a near touchdown.
Desperation can push franchises toward aggressive decisions, especially when their quarterback options appear unconvincing or outdated. One scenario now emerging is that Sanders earns enough confidence to take full preseason reps with the starters, forcing Cleveland to revisit a depth chart it believed was settled at the beginning of July. His practices demonstrate that the excitement around him is grounded in measurable performance. Accurate, high-velocity passes against first-team defenses, and confident command of the huddle. Each strong outing also heightens league-wide interest. Rival scouts adjust evaluations, and general managers revisit their notes, aware that a viable young quarterback may soon become available. Inside the facility, the personnel staff must balance short-term results with long-term roster planning, knowing that an early move could reshape salary cap allocations and locker room dynamics. The pressure on Watson and Thompson Robinson escalates accordingly. Both must produce visible progress to maintain their current roles. Cleveland's recent history shows how quickly promising quarterback situations can devolve into controversy. The franchise has turned potential breakthroughs into organizational turmoil before, so observers remain cautious about how this competition will unfold.
What do you think is happening in Browns camp? What do you think is going to happen there before I let you go, Lewis?
You know, I think it really does. It really does all depend on how Kevin is able to, as it relates to Shedeur, work him in enough. Well, one, Shedeur has to earn the right for Kevin and the staff to have discussions about, hey, we got to get him more reps with the ones and twos. We got to get him more reps with the ones and twos when we're going team period, not just walk through or not just 7-on-7 team.
Louis Riddick reacted sharply on air after viewing practice footage from the Cleveland Browns. The clip showed quarterback Shedeur Sanders executing a string of precise throws while the Browns head coach watched with a broad smile. Riddick questioned whether the session was focused on evaluation or celebration, arguing that visible enthusiasm from the staff could cloud objective assessment of a rookie's progress. Earlier in the segment, Riddick's tone had been measured once the Sanders highlights appeared. He criticized the perception that a routine practice was being treated like a marquee event. He stressed that coaching reactions should remain subdued until performance translates into game situations. Riddick concluded by calling for accountability and asking the Browns to clarify how they plan to manage expectations for Shedeur Sanders as training camp continues.
Couldn't imagine me myself saying, hey, you know what, as someone who has been at the very bottom to try and ascend to like some level of success, I could never imagine going, you know what would be really cool? I'm gonna play a joke on someone like this and pretend that I'm a GM and I'm drafting you when actually I'm not, and then I'm gonna hang up and just giggle about it. Man, what the hell are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing when we think that kind of crap is funny?
I don't know. Trying to get likes on TikTok.
I don't have the right words for it.
Right, Lewis, I'm gonna say this.
I don't have the right words for it.
Few situations unsettle a former front office executive faster than watching coaches celebrate a rookie quarterback before pads come on in August. In Louis Riddick's view, the Browns staff did more than acknowledge promise. They acted as though they had already secured their franchise leader. Throughout the session, Shedeur Sanders delivered 40-yard throws off his back foot, ran crisp 2-minute drills, and displayed steadiness rare for a first-year player. According to reports, each successful rep drew audible admiration from the sideline, highlighting how quickly enthusiasm has escalated. When Riddick reviewed the same practice tape and heard the glowing comments, he challenged the reaction on live television. He argued that a few controlled drills should not override the methodical scouting and development work that normally guides roster decisions. Riddick's criticism focused less on Sanders' talent than on the evaluation process. He warned that comparing a prospect to established stars or joking about renaming the stadium creates pressure before the player has taken an NFL hit, faced a disguised coverage, or logged a preseason snap. Praising potential is acceptable, he said, but anointing a savior in July risks repeating the organization's history of premature quarterback expectations. Sanders brings confidence shaped by his father's legacy and his own disciplined preparation, yet Riddick insists that progress must be confirmed over time. He urged the Browns to temper public excitement, follow a structured development plan, and reserve celebratory reactions for on-field results that matter. Regular season production under live pressure, not highlight clips from a midsummer workout.
He has to earn that. Kevin has to figure out a way to do that. So then you can reasonably assess what you have in him compared to Dillon Gabriel, compared to Kenny, compared to Joe Flacco. If you don't, then the conversation surrounding him is going to continue to be what it's been, which is, but for some people, he was overhyped all along. He's not that great of an athlete, doesn't have a big enough arm. There's a reason why he was a 5th-round pick, blah, 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 which I don't believe. I believe if he is given enough reps, earns enough reps, and then is given enough reps in meaningful situations, he can throw the ball just as good as Joe, if not better, just as good as Kenny, if not better, just as good as Dillon Gabriel.
After more than 2 decades in personnel and broadcast analysis, Louis Riddick was dismayed to see a franchise bypass basic evaluation standards after only a series of eye-catching minicamp throws. Reviewing practice footage from Cleveland, he observed Shedeur Sanders drilling 40-yard passes against uncovered receivers and running 2-minute sequences with poise. In Riddick's view, those reps, conducted without pads, contact, or a disguised rush, show arm talent but reveal little about how a rookie handles game pressure. Riddick said the Browns' reaction drifted from objective assessment to outright admiration. Multiple reports indicated coaches were sketching new concepts for Sanders during dinner and referring to dedicated Shedeur packages well before a padded practice. Even the veterans in the quarterback room showed no visible alarm, a sign that staff excitement had already reset the internal depth chart conversation. The analyst emphasized that his concern is not Sanders' skill set. He acknowledged the quarterback's arm strength, footwork, and composure, but rather how quickly the club appears willing to declare him its long-term answer. Riddick cited several past prospects who received similar midsummer acclaim only to stall once real competition began. Given Cleveland's long history of quarterback turnover, he argued the organization should focus on incremental milestones, processing post-snap reads, surviving live pass rushes, and rebounding from mistakes on Sunday afternoons. Riddick urged the Browns to temper expectations and follow a structured development plan so Shedeur Sanders can progress without undue pressure. One coach reportedly admitted he replayed Tuesday's scrimmage film so often that he lost sleep, an anecdote Riddick offered as proof that enthusiasm is already outpacing reality.
All asking now is what is going on with Shedeur Sanders, and so the floor is yours. Maybe you can make sense of this free fall with what was at one point the top-rated quarterback in this draft class.
Yeah, Shay, I think at this point in time, this really isn't a football discussion any longer. This is a personal discussion. This is about it's a fit discussion. It's whether or not teams are just comfortable with everything that comes along with Shedeur in terms of who he is as a person, all the people that are surrounding him in terms of his inner circle, and whether or not teams deem that to be something that they're comfortable with. Right or wrong, that's the only conclusion you can really come to at this point.
Louis Riddick voiced an escalating concern during the segment. Having witnessed numerous quarterback setbacks in his career, he worries another may be forming, not because Shedeur Sanders lacks talent, but because the praise around him is growing without restraint. Sanders has simply attended practice, delivered accurate passes, led the huddle, and shown the composure expected of an NFL player. Riddick fears the Browns' reaction, treating routine drills as proof of long-term success, risks setting premature expectations. He cautioned that the organization seems ready to celebrate a franchise savior before Sanders has taken a competitive snap, noting that such early adulation has derailed promising prospects in the past and could impede Sanders' measured development.
How you feeling?
I'm getting there. You see what I got on, right?
That's what I was asking how you help for.
Yeah, I'm getting there. See?
Brian, what they had to?
I had blood clots.
Okay.
And they amputated, But I work with it.
Man.
Yeah, I'm amputated. So I get that work done a couple times a day. Keep the blood circulating, blood flowing, but it's a new normal. And the best thing about here, we have a whole medical team on the second floor. Right. We have a whole medical floor, which is great.
Deion Sanders is shaken, this time not by a hit on the field. In a sudden turn, Ryan Clark has uncovered a serious plot affecting Shedeur Sanders' NFL draft status, and the disclosure is reverberating across the sports community. What once looked like a simple scheduling delay may actually be a calculated effort to undermine Deion's son. The facts suggest intentional sabotage, a breach of trust, and repercussions that could be far-reaching. This is no routine football headline. It is personal, and Coach Prime did not see it coming.
The sports world loves to celebrate underdogs, yet it often takes even greater pleasure in tearing down rising stars. Deion Sanders is witnessing that cycle now, not from the sidelines as Coach Prime, but as a father. The lights in Boulder remain bright, the cameras keep rolling, and Sanders still wears his gold watches, sunglasses, and natural swagger. Still, behind that familiar smile is a man carrying deep pain as criticism aimed at his son mounts daily.
How much of that is opening press conference saying, okay, we are family, saying that he was sent to do certain things? Do you feel like people got attached to that, or it just was the fact that prime time is at Jackson State?
It's prime time. If my son plays cornerback, I want him to be around, in my opinion, the best cornerback ever to touch the field.
That's right.
If my son played DN, I'd have to talk to you and tell me who's coaching the DNs.
That's
but
right.
I was sending my son to play for prime.
His pain does not come from critics or losses, but from watching his son, Shedeur Sanders, get pulled into a system where politics outweigh performance. By every metric, arm strength, accuracy, field vision, Shedeur belonged in the top 3 of any NFL mock draft. Defensive coordinators who tried to unsettle him know he never flinches. He owns the unteachable leadership trait that turns strong prospects into franchise cornerstones. Then the narrative shifted. Draft boards that once placed him 2nd or 3rd slid him to 5th, then 12th, and eventually out of the 1st round on some lists. Analysts grew cautious, executives became vague. The statistics stayed strong, and the game film still proved his ability, yet the buzz evaporated. The abrupt silence felt deliberate and wrong. Former NFL safety and respected analyst Ryan Clark then delivered an unfiltered disclosure, not on a scheduled TV segment, but in an unscripted comment. He stated plainly that influential figures inside the league were not overlooking Shedeur Sanders. They were actively holding him back. The motive, Clark said, was political, and the real target was Deion Sanders, Hall of Famer, architect of Jackson State's resurgence, and the coach who turned a 1-11 Colorado program into a national headline. Deion's refusal to conform, wearing sunglasses indoors, dancing with players, speaking candidly, challenged an establishment that favors predictable images and rehearsed statements. According to Clark, that resistance to tradition was not forgotten. When Shedeur displayed the same mix of talent and confidence, concern spread through front offices and media circles. Questions about leadership style and attitude surfaced. Coded language for discomfort with a quarterback who mirrors his outspoken father. Clark's point was clear. The issue is not Shedeur's performance. If he had posted identical numbers at Ohio State or Alabama, endorsements and media specials would follow. Instead, interest cooled, because the Sanders family embodies a self-made identity the league cannot easily manage. Their visible pride and independent brand challenge a system that prizes control. And that threat, not football ability, is what Clark believes is suppressing Shedeur's draft stock.
The rumors have ended. The decision is public. Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam has informed every level of the organization that unless an unforeseen injury intervenes, Shedeur Sanders will start at quarterback in week 1. The announcement is not an informal suggestion or a quiet push in the background. It is a direct order. Multiple independent reports, amplified most visibly by Colin Cowherd, confirm that Haslam delivered the directive himself. From the owner's viewpoint, the logic is simple. No one else on the roster offers the same combination of talent, leadership, and long-term upside. Joe Flacco is approaching the twilight of his career. Kenny Pickett has shown flashes but remains inconsistent. Dillon Gabriel, taken in the 3rd round, is a developmental project. By contrast, Haslam believes Sanders can alter the franchise's trajectory immediately, and he refuses to allow internal hesitation to stall that possibility. The standoff traces back to April. General manager Andrew Berry and head coach Kevin Stefanski entered the draft wanting a low-profile prospect who would fit quietly into the existing depth chart. They prioritized scheme familiarity, modest public attention, and a clear developmental timeline. When the board lined up, they reached for Gabriel in round 3, reasoning that an early investment would justify keeping a rookie on ice behind the veterans. But Sanders continued to slide, first through day 2, then deep into round 5. Haslam watched the names come off off the board convinced the league's bias against Deion Sanders' outspoken son was obscuring legitimate first-round talent. When Cleveland's fifth-round pick arrived and Sanders was still available, Haslam intervened. He did more than approve the choice, he overrode the original plan, making it clear that the organization would select Sanders and give him every chance to compete. From that moment on, the Browns' internal narrative splintered into two camps: those ready to accelerate around their owner's vision, and those still trying to protect their original approach. Once rookie minicamp began, Sanders erased much of the speculation. He commanded huddles, processed coverages quickly, and delivered throws with anticipation that belied his draft slot. Teammates noted his willingness to accept blame for missed timing, then correct the error without dramatics. While Flacco and Pickett split most first-team reps, Sanders treated limited opportunities as full-speed auditions. During organized team activities, he identified blitz looks, redirected protections, and consistently found his second read when the primary route was covered. More than one defensive veteran told local reporters that Sanders looks like the best arm in the building. That assessment forced Barry and Stefanski to reevaluate their timetable. They could no longer label Sanders a long-term project without contradicting on-field evidence. Drafting Gabriel 2 rounds earlier had provided the staff an excuse to slow roll Sanders' ascent. Coaches could point to investment cost, meeting room familiarity, and installation comfort to justify Gabriel's snap share. Yet each practice rep in which Sanders outperformed the third rounder weakened that shield. Behind closed doors, position coaches began requesting more Sanders film for cut-ups, and offensive assistants quietly shifted meeting questions toward concepts the rookie already executed well. By mid-June, Barry himself started describing Sanders not as a developmental asset, but as a competitive option. Those subtle linguistic changes signaled the front office's recognition that the narrative had moved beyond their control. Haslam's history with quarterbacks is well documented. His pushes for Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, and Deshaun Watson were high-visibility swings, each driven in part by a desire to generate excitement as well as wins. Critics highlight those choices to question his evaluation track record, yet Haslam perceives Sanders differently. Where Manziel carried off-field concerns, Sanders brings a reputation for professionalism. Where Mayfield's leadership style divided veterans, Sanders' approach has united receivers and linemen. Where Watson's trade involved unprecedented controversy, Sanders arrived at minimal draft cost. Haslam sees a rare chance to capture star potential without mortgaging the future, and he is unwilling to cede that upside to cautious pacing. Cleveland's supporters, weary of revolving door quarterbacks, have rallied around Sanders with unexpected speed. Sales of customized Sanders number 2 jerseys surged within days of rookie minicamp. Training camp ticket requests spiked once local media circulated videos of Sanders making NFL-caliber anticipation throws during 7-on-7 periods. The mood in Northeast Ohio has changed from tentative hope to active belief. Longtime season ticket holders who once shrugged at preseason storylines now debate Sanders' footwork at neighborhood barbecues. Social media engagement for Browns content has climbed, driven by highlight compilations of the rookie threading seam passes between linebackers and safeties. All of this places Kevin Stefanski in a fragile position. If he opens week 1 with a veteran starter and the offense sputters, criticism will be swift. Each stalled drive will be interpreted as evidence that he ignored the owner's edict and the fan base's intuition. Conversely, if he names Sanders the starter solely under pressure, any early struggles could be framed as proof that Sanders was rushed, further exposing Stefanski to blame. The only sustainable solution is conviction. Either stand behind a veteran with clear strategic reasoning or embrace Sanders fully and structure the offense around his strengths. Splitting the difference, rotating series, delaying first-team reps, or using vague competition language will satisfy no one and likely jeopardize locker room clarity. Sanders' personal approach has reinforced Haslam's confidence. Instead of taking post-draft downtime, he traveled to Texas to train in full Browns gear at facilities near his father's home. The leaked clip of Sanders executing footwork drills in helmet and pads wasn't a marketing ploy. It was a glimpse into a quarterback visualizing Week 1 live. Team personnel who viewed the footage recognized purposeful rehearsal, cadence calls, pocket movement against simulated pressure, and follow-through adjustments based on imagined rush lanes. Observers asked why a rookie would conduct such intense solo sessions in May. The answer is straightforward. Sanders does not view himself as a developmental pick. He considers himself the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns and prepares accordingly.
On pure ability, Sanders' arm strength ranks with the league average for starters. His accuracy to the intermediate middle, an area where the Browns' current scheme generates high leverage completions, has drawn consistent praise from receivers. The primary areas still under review are blitz recognition and live bullets and timing on deep outbreaking routes versus press coverage. Those developmental checkpoints are significant, yet daily practice reps show acceleration. In contrast, Flacco's mobility limits the boot action game that Stefanski installed to help Mayfield early in his tenure. Pickett can extend plays, but struggles to attack tight windows between linebackers and safeties, an essential requirement in Cleveland schematics. Gabriel remains an unknown at NFL speed. Thus, the competitive landscape favors Sanders sooner than the coaching staff originally planned.
The franchise now stands at an inflection point. Haslam's mandate, the locker room's growing support, and the fan base's enthusiasm all tilt towards Sanders. The front office's earlier strategy, anchored in patience and quiet development, is increasingly untenable. Barry's shift in messaging indicates grudging alignment, but final authority over the depth chart rests with the coaching staff, unless ownership directly intervenes on game day decisions. A move rare, but not unprecedented in the NFL. Should Stefanski align with the owner and name Sanders the starter before preseason concludes, he can claim proactive vision and tailor the offense through training camp. Should he resist and open with a veteran who falters, he risks rapid loss of credibility and possibly his position. Either path carries pressure, but only one aligns with the momentum sweeping through the building. For 2 decades, the Browns have cycled quarterbacks without securing a stable star. Each new hope, whether draft pick or trade acquisition, has collapsed under injuries, inconsistency, or organizational disarray. The possibility that Sanders could finally anchor the position is not merely a football storyline. It is a potential cultural reset for a fan base defined by resilience. Haslam's insistence reflects that awareness. Cleveland needs a leader who can win on Sundays and project confidence every other day of the week. Sanders has shown he can shoulder expectations without retreating from scrutiny. That trait, more than arm talent alone, is why the owner views him as indispensable. Voluntary workouts transition to mandatory minicamp next week. If Sanders receives a substantial share of first-team snaps, observers will interpret it as the staff's acknowledgement that the competition is tilting decisively. A public declaration may not follow immediately, but every rep allocation is a signal. If, however, the staff continues funneling most top unit snaps to Flacco or Pickett, tension will escalate. Local media will question the evaluation process. National analysts will debate the merits of letting a rookie learn through live action versus controlled practice. Inside the facility, players will recognize any disconnect between performance and opportunity, and unity could fray. The Browns have reached a decisive moment. Shedeur Sanders has demonstrated the skill, poise, and work ethic to justify starting in week 1. Jimmy Haslam has publicly positioned him as the future, and by implication the present of the franchise. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Barry must either endorse that vision or brace for the consequences of delaying it. For Cleveland fans, the significance is clear. A legitimate chance to exit the cycle of quarterback uncertainty and rally behind a signal caller capable of commanding the field and galvanizing the city. Whether that opportunity is seized promptly or postponed will define the Browns' 2025 season and likely the tenure of the decision makers involved. They have never loathed college football itself. They have resisted the people determined to reshape it. When Deion Sanders, black, direct, unapologetic, walks into a room of power brokers and speaks with authority instead of deference, critics recoil. During his playing days, they complained about celebrations and gold chains. Now that he is a head coach, mentor, and father, they label him something more polite, but just as dismissive, a problem. At Big 12 Media Days, Sanders addressed the accelerating chaos of the name, image, likeness market. He said college football needs a salary cap, not to hobble players, but to impose order on a system that showers unproven freshmen with 7-figure promises while the rest of a roster hunts for scraps. He called the situation unsustainable. Within hours, ESPN commentator Paul Feinbaum branded him a hypocrite, arguing that Sanders profited from NIL at Jackson State and now wants rules only because his most marketable athletes have moved on. The accusation spread quickly because it fit a comfortable storyline. Outspoken black coach gains from change, then protests when the advantage disappears. That framing ignores context. Sanders never criticized players earning money. At Jackson State, he urged corporate sponsors to partner with athletes who had been invisible to major brands for decades. What he wants now is stability, standardized guidelines, basic financial literacy, and roster balance that prevents locker rooms from fracturing over uneven payouts. When other coaches, Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Lane Kiffin, voiced similar concerns, they were praised for foresight. When Sanders spoke, the tone shifted to suspicion. The difference is not the message, it is the messenger.
Feinbaum's response followed a familiar script. When black leaders question the structure of the sport, their motives are interrogated, their credibility attacked, and their competence doubted. He did not level the same charge at Jimbo Fisher when Fisher complained that NIL disturbed recruiting. He stayed silent when Kiffin lamented the transfer portal. But Sanders, who raised enrollment and television ratings at Jackson State, brought unprecedented attention to Colorado in one season and consistently mentors players beyond football, was called opportunistic. Feinbaum dismissed the cultural impact Sanders created, the exposure for historically black colleges, the draft picks developed, the infrastructure improved, reducing his work to a marketing stunt dependent on star sons Shedeur and Shiloh or two-way standout Travis Hunter. Sanders did not retaliate. He returned to practice, media obligations, and recruiting. His confidence is rooted in faith and in the responsibility he feels toward young athletes whose lives will extend decades beyond their highlight clips. When he asks for NIL boundaries, he is thinking about freshmen handed large sums without guidance, families unprepared for sudden wealth, and programs that abandon kids once production stalls. He has watched that cycle from the inside. He wants protections, not restrictions. Critics predicted Colorado would fade once Shedeur and Hunter leave. Instead, Sanders signed blue-chip quarterback G.J. Lewis and a wave of transfers eager to join a program that values personal growth as much as on-field wins. Recruits see a coach who challenges the status quo, who places black culture at the program's center without apology, and who will remain visible when social media buzz cools. They recognize that Sanders does not chase attention. Attention follows his results. Media outlets reduced the upcoming Buffaloes season to a win total prop. 6 victories, give or take. Sanders is playing a longer game. He wants to show young athletes, especially black athletes, that they can lead authentically, speak with conviction, and refuse to shrink for access. Success measured only by the scoreboard misses the point. If Sanders builds men who graduate with financial literacy, self-confidence, and community awareness, he will consider the mission successful, even if Colorado finishes with 5 wins instead of 10. None of that registers with commentators invested in an older hierarchy. For them, leadership should remain predictable, reserved posture, muted tone, minimal cultural expression. Sanders contradicts that image. The possibility that his methods could spread to other coaches, to other programs, threatens a model that has kept decision-making and revenue streams concentrated for generations. So the debate is not about hypocrisy or payroll ceilings. It is about control of the narrative and who is deemed qualified to write it. Sanders refuses to surrender that authority. He knows order is necessary. He also knows whose voices have been ignored whenever real reform is discussed. By speaking plainly, he forces television panels, athletic directors, and conference commissioners to confront issues they would rather defer: financial education, equitable resource distribution, and consistent national standards. Whether Colorado exceeds betting lines this fall will not change the trajectory Sanders has already set. He made Boulder relevant, energized recruiting beyond traditional power corridors, and broadened college football's cultural reach. That influence will persist long after social media debates cool. If his call for NIL structure eventually becomes policy, as the NCAA and Congress now contemplate, Feinbaum's soundbite will fade, while Sanders' imprint endures. In the end, accusations of hypocrisy say more about the accuser than the coach. Sanders has remained consistent: empower athletes, hold adults accountable, and inject stability before unchecked money corrodes the locker room. The people who stand to lose clout in that environment prefer the chaos they can manipulate. Sanders prefers a system that nurtures the players who make the sport worth watching. His advocacy is rooted in experience, not self-interest, and his critics will have to decide whether to engage with that reality or keep shouting from the sidelines. Chris Carter's televised assessment of Shedeur Sanders triggered immediate pushback from Cleveland fans, local media, and even several Browns veterans. Carter dismissed Sanders, a 5th-round pick, as unprepared to start, and framed the growing interest around him as purely a byproduct of surname recognition. Since that segment aired, practice reports have told a very different story. Observers inside the Browns facility describe a rookie quarterback who is closing the gap on Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel with surprising speed. Sanders first turned heads in rookie minicamp by directing the huddle with a calm that belied his inexperience. Position coaches reported that he rarely repeated mental errors during installation periods, a trait they rank highly when grading young quarterbacks. In organized team activities, he showed consistent timing on intermediate routes, kept turnover numbers low in 7-on-7 periods, and demonstrated early command of Kevin Stefanski's protection calls. That steady execution earned him a handful of first-team snaps, reps that would ordinarily have belonged to Pickett by default. By mandatory minicamp, the rotation had shifted again. Practice notes from beat reporters detail the rise in Sanders' workload each day. Red zone series against the starting defense, 2-minute drills, and full field scrimmage possessions in which he checked out of called plays when fronts dictated it. Mary Kay Cabot, initially skeptical Sanders would challenge for game day snaps in 2025, wrote after consecutive sessions in mid-June that his footwork, release speed, and pocket management had, quote, meaningfully tightened since rookie camp. Her tone marked a clear departure from early spring projections that labeled Sanders a long-term developmental project.
The broader quarterback context in Cleveland magnifies that progress. Deshaun Watson's availability and form remain uncertain after 2 injury-interrupted seasons, while Pickett's transition from Pittsburgh has been uneven. Dillon Gabriel's arm strength is evident, but coaches continue to stress hesitation in his full-field reads. Against that backdrop, Sanders' quick decision-making and mechanical efficiency have begun to look less like a pleasant surprise and more like the roster's most reliable short-term plan. Inside the locker room, acceptance has followed performance. Wide receivers cite Sanders' ball placement on outbreaking routes, noting that the ball routinely arrives on the upfield shoulder, a small but essential detail that allows for yards after the catch. Offensive linemen appreciate his pocket awareness. Joel Bitonio remarked privately that Sanders slides up instead of bailing when edge pressure flashes. Defensive backs say his eye discipline forces them to hold coverage longer than they expected against a rookie. Such cross-positional respect develops only when day-to-day tape shows tangible improvement. The reaction to Carter's critique highlights a recurring double standard applied to young black quarterbacks. Traits celebrated as swagger or confidence in other players were labeled arrogance when associated with Sanders, yet the quarterback himself has not responded publicly. There have been no subtle social media jabs, no mention of critics in interviews, only repeated references to competing for every rep and learning from veterans. That measured approach, combined with hard evidence from practice, has softened earlier doubts among coaches who prioritize demeanor as much as arm talent. Within the coaching staff, the discussion now centers on readiness thresholds. Stefanski's scheme relies heavily on quick rhythm throws, defined reads, and disciplined pocket movement. Those requirements align with Sanders' strengths: a compact release, willingness to target the middle of the field, and instinctive timing on RPO concepts carried over from his college tape. Staffers reviewing cut-ups from joint practices note that his internal clock already approximates NFL speed, a metric they did not expect to see until mid-season at best. If that trajectory continues through preseason games, the Browns face a consequential decision. Starting a 5th-round rookie 6 weeks after training camp opens would unsettle salary cap assumptions, depth chart politics, and external perceptions of organizational stability. Yet the internal mandate remains clear: the most prepared quarterback will play. That standard places Sanders in genuine contention because every practice metric used to grade readiness, turnover ratio, red zone efficiency, third down conversion rate has trended in his favor since early June. The organizational stakes are considerable. Cleveland has cycled through starting quarterbacks at a startling pace over the past decade, shifting from first-round investments like Baker Mayfield to high-cost gambles such as Watson, each move packaged as the long-awaited solution. A rookie chosen outside the first 100 picks ascending to the top of the depth chart would challenge long-held league assumptions about draft pedigree and opportunity. It would also validate the evaluation philosophy that prioritized Sanders' intangibles: processing speed, leadership presence, over conventional arm strength thresholds that pushed him down the draft board. Carter's televised remarks now sit awkwardly alongside daily updates from Berea. His critique relied on pre-draft labels and the presumption that a late-round passer with a famous father would need a redshirt year. Practice film contradicts that stance. Sanders checks protections at the line, manipulates safeties with shoulder fakes, and has reduced turnover-worthy throws and full-speed sessions to single digits. Statistics normally cited for veteran backups, not rookies. The longer that evidence accumulates, the more Carter's comments appear rooted in legacy bias rather than objective performance review. None of this guarantees Sanders will open the season under center. Preseason defenses test quarterbacks in ways practice cannot. Defensive coordinators will disguise pressure and boundary rotation to force late decisions. Sanders must show he can adjust protections and exploit mismatches without the benefit of a controlled environment. Yet within the Browns facility, the conversation has shifted from if he will be ready to when. Quiet confidence from Amari Cooper and other veterans suggests they believe Sanders can steady an offense searching for consistency more than highlight reel heroics. Sanders' rise also affects long-term roster calculus. If he earns the job and performs competently, Cleveland gains starter-level production on a cost-controlled rookie contract, freeing cap space allocated to other positions. That scenario could reshape roster-building strategy in a division featuring Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson.
quarterbacks whose contracts consume significant percentages of team payroll. A capable, low-cost starter would allow the Browns to reinforce their offensive line and secondary while retaining core veterans, a competitive advantage few teams enjoy. For now, the focal point remains daily improvement. Sanders continues to arrive before sunrise, reviewing the previous day's install with the quarterback coach, then staying after practice to throw on-air routes with receivers low on the depth chart. Coaches track those habits closely because consistent routine underpins performance when adversity strikes in live games. Each incremental gain strengthens the argument that readiness depends on preparation and aptitude, not draft slot. Carter's segment reminded the league how quickly assessments can become outdated when they lean on perception over evidence. Sanders' steady climb up the depth chart underscores the counterpoint. In the NFL, tape is the final arbiter. Should Sanders translate practice efficiency to preseason success, the Browns may discover that the solution to their long-standing quarterback riddle arrived quietly in the 5th round, carrying little more than confidence and a willingness to work.